Hey people, it's me, Eco Chick, and here we are with tank life with little Seymour the Snail and Snarky the Shark, and we have also Frowny Face Frog on the scene today. And so I just, things are looking about the same as yesterday. I'm not going to spend too much time with the tank because there's still not a lot of changes. So I'll take you up to the chart and talk about that in just a moment. Just really quickly, as every time, 53 degrees. Our room is at 60 degrees, so it's staying nice and chilly in here. I haven't been manipulating the heat to turn it up. I'm just layering up. Our pH is slightly lowered, ever so slightly. It's hard to tell, but Frowny is still a little frowny. I'm working with that. I'm going to put in some more pH down drops today. Probably I'll try 40 today to get a little lower. So bringing you on over just to go over the data. Still at about 100. We haven't lost any. Good egg health. 53 degrees, 847 total temperature units. And I did a little math problem over here because I'm curious like how far beyond the average we're getting. And so we're about 57 temperature units from, the average emerging of alvin. So we're going to keep an eye on that. And I'm kind of curious if the original temperature units were correct. So I did note that pH is a little bit better. Our, same thing happening with the egg health, and that I'm aiming to add some drops into the tank today. So I'm going to bring you over here, though, to a couple of the things I have happening here. And I want to show you this. This is the Willamette Basin. It's a map of the Willamette Basin. And this is the basin that has many smaller, it's like a big watershed with lots of smaller watersheds within it. And so if you look closely, there are names of different ones all over the place. And here, right here, the Mckenzie Watershed, this is the watershed that brings us our drinking water. And you'll see here that there's the middle fork of the Willamette, the upper Willamette, the middle Willamette, the lower Willamette, and lots of other rivers that are flowing into those. And so each of these are different little watersheds. And even within the Mckenzie Watershed where we get our water, there's a whole bunch of other smaller watersheds. And I'll show you a more in-depth map in just a minute, a three-dimensional map. So we live right here in the Eugene-Springfield area, and it's kind of a special place. It's not kind of. We all know it's really special because we live here. But the thing that's super cool is that right in our city, there's a special thing that happens with two rivers. They meet each other. The Mckenzie and the Willamette River meet each other, and it is called a confluence. When rivers meet, it is called a confluence. So that's a pretty cool thing to be happening here. And just to show you too, any salmon that are making their way to us in all the way over here are coming from way up here, the mouth of the Columbia River. And so our Chinook salmon that laid these eggs, they had to come in through here. They swam into the Columbia, and then they broke off and they went into the lower Willamette, and then they had to find their way. It's like, Clackamas or Willamette. I'm going to keep going Willamette. Tualatin. Nope, not that either. They kept going and going, and they kept going. And this year, our little eggs came from this area over here in the Santiam watershed. But if we would have gotten them from our usual hatchery, they would have made their way all the way through the Willamette, through the upper Willamette. They would have had to decide to turn at the Mckenzie River, but these would have continued on up the middle fork of the Willamette until they were stopped, of course, at a reservoir where they're collected and taken to their hatchery upriver. It's kind of a unique human interaction there. And so, yeah, it's super different from what wild fish go through. So this is the Willamette Basin. This is the coastline of Oregon, just so you know. And this browner part up here, that's Washington, and the Columbia River basically borders right there. So that's kind of cool. I want to show you this map just briefly. this is an outline of the Mckenzie Watershed and some various sites along here. This is a recycled map, so I really am more interested in this section here because we aren't right there. We are actually way over here. Something super important to note is, right over this way, we get our water from the Mckenzie, and it's intaken through a place called the Hayden Bridge water filtration area. So now one more little jaunt over to another map and just sort of walk by here and check out our stuff again. And then I have this super cool map over here, and this is a 3-dimensional map of the Blue River watershed. And the blue lines that you see are some of the main waterways. In particular, right here is Blue River. It starts up in the mountains there and flows through, and it has many creeks that, join it, Mona and Lookout and several others. And then it makes its way over here, and you'll notice it starts to widen quite a bit. And I've colored in right here a little bit darker with green, and right here, and those are actually 2 different dams that are on the river here. So this one is called a saddle dam, and it is just blocking the water so it can't flow actually down here into the Mckenzie River. And over here, this dam is holding it back so we can either trap this water for electricity purposes or for pretty much that's mainly what's happening. And then the Blue River actually, they'll open it up from the dam and it gets narrower again and flows into the Mckenzie. And then if this kept going, you would see it coming all the way over into Eugene. So I have outlined the top of a couple of smaller watersheds within this watershed. And I did that because I wanted to point out that a couple of important features about watersheds is there are always ridges, there are saddles between mountains, and then, there's the flow patterns that happen, just to kind of keep it simple. And so if it starts to rain, think about what you think will happen. If it starts to rain on the top of those ridges where I have that green ink, think about what will happen. On the top of the mountain, there's water flowing in the valleys. So let's see. And then create some rain. And as you see it starting to rain, what do you notice? What are you noticing? Think about what you're noticing. Other than that my spray bottle is kind of squeaky. So you'll see it is creating some action there. And so, yeah, it starts to pool up, and if this were a real river, it would start flowing into the river, but instead it pooled up in a flat spot because, sometimes flooding happens, and if there's too much water, it'll start taking over an area. So it's just kind of a cool thing to take a look at a watershed, start to understand what a watershed is and what a model of a watershed looks like. And the other cool thing is, no matter where you are in a watershed. So it'd be kind of cool for you to try to figure out which watershed you're in. One other little side thing. So usually this is a water bottle that I use. And here it is with its top. And what do you notice about the water bottle? What are you noticing? Do you see this? What color do you think it used to be? This one isn't quite as faded out. What color do you think the bottle used to be? If you said green, you're right. And so the cool thing about colors is when colors mix together, they make other colors. And so the green of this bottle sort of faded, and the bottle turned a little yellow. And when I pour the water into this container here, you'll see, wow. And here's what you need to know. The water started out this color. If the bottle would have been clear, we wouldn't be able to see what happened to the plastic in the sun. So these other bottles were in the sun, and I'm pointing this out for a very important reason. Sometimes people buy single, like, I'm really thirsty, I need water right now, and they buy a bottle of water. And especially during COVID, that's been a really more common thing than ever. But something that happens is sometimes people will reuse these, and these are single-use bottles. They're meant to be used once and then recycled. This is actually worth 10 cents. But thinking about, if you leave this in your car and it has water in it, and you've already drank out of it even, and it's open, think about, can you see what's happening with the plastic reacting to the heat? If this is a clear bottle. If you're saying no, you can't really see it, you're right. And the thing is, just because we can't see a change in the water, does that mean there's nothing happening? Absolutely not. And so just thinking about, take a reusable bottle with you, and it can actually be in the car a little bit, especially if it's not made out of plastic. And it's just something to think about, single-use items versus multiple-use items, and things that are made for a single use aren't meant to be reused, and so they break down, and sometimes they break down and we're drinking those little microplastics. So just a little side lesson. And anyway, so this is EcoChick and the Blue River Watershed model and some interesting water samples and tank life, signing out. But actually, one last thing. You may have heard of this watershed or this place, Blue River. And so an important thing to note is that right about, here is where the city or the town of Blue River was. And when we had the holiday farm fire a couple years back now, this area all along the river here, all over here, and way into here all burned. And so the city of Blue River, or the little town of Blue River, is completely, was completely destroyed in that fire. And so thinking about that, this area now doesn't have as many trees as it used to, be thinking about how that might affect the watershed. And, the cool thing is there are people working on doing some restoration things to try to help with that. But a really super important other scientific thing to think about is erosion, the idea of erosion and what will happen in a watershed when the trees are no longer there. And the good news is, though, even though this fire happened, the salmon have been making their way upriver, and they have been seen spawning the last 2 years, and so that's really super great news. And so we'll just have to work together to help the land and help the water and ultimately help the salmon. So this is EcoChick signing out for real this time. Have a wonderful whatever you do.